Welcome to our first session after our keynote. Thanks for joining us today. So we have with us Mary, Aery, and Missy Freeman. They are from Lake-Bena Middle School. Their school has been implementing a long time, and they have done just some really great things with connecting restorative practices right into their framework. And I know a lot of times when we have other things that we're doing in our buildings, whether it's restorative practices or conscious discipline, and you always try to figure out, like, how do we put those things together so it really feels like they fit? And they have some wonderful examples for you around that. So I'm going to pass it over to Mary and Missy. Thank you so much for presenting today. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank
you. Do that.
Again, Mary, Aery, and Missy Freeman, District, and this is Restorative Practices in PBIS.
All right, go ahead and change it. This is a little bit about myself. This is my family. I have two young kids and my husband. We live in Walker. We love to be on the lake, go fishing, hiking, walking. That one doesn't look like the right one. And different things like that. So I'm going to share professionally, I'm a behavior interventionist at Lake-Bena Middle School. The second half of the year, this year, I filled in as assistant principal. And I've been running our school climate team, which encompasses the restorative practices and PBIS for the last few years, and then have also worked on creating our district climate team that is all schools, so middle, high school, elementary, and ALC. And that's been really good to create district visions and missions. Mary, you're up, and Erin, I'm going to share with you a different slideshow if we can use that one instead.
Yeah, and this is Mary, and while we're waiting for the other slideshow to come up, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. We have screens talking about ourselves a little bit, but I've been with the district for 6 years, and prior to coming into Cass Lake, I worked in Alaska for 10 years, and important to tell you that because 6.5 of those years I worked with a PBIS initiative with early childhood and Head Starts, like the taxi model, and really got a bird's eye view, I should say, traveling rural remote Alaska, 55 places. There's my slide there talking about supporting early education teachers and Head Start teachers into the tenets of PBIS. So I've worked in education for over 25 years. My husband and I have got 3 grown kids, 10 grandkids, and of course we have this golden retriever that thinks she's one of our children. I love to travel. I love photography, spending time with family and friends, and really am a great believer in PBIS and restorative practices. So, okay, ready for the next slide. This is showing a picture of part of our campus. Actually, we've got the district office and the elementary school and the alternative, our area learning center are actually located inside of Cass Lake in the town, but this is our campus with our middle school and our high school, and we've got a really beautiful campus for those of you that have been on campus.
Some things to know about our district. We are 91% Native American, so we are located on the heart of the reservation and work closely with the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. We're about 90% free and reduced. We also provide 3 meals a day to our students. We get a lot of grants, federal funding. We have a lot of support services. Unfortunately, in the last year or two, we haven't been able to fill all of our positions, but that's a little bit of the dynamic of our district. Thank you, Erin. Next slide.
So this is a welcome. Oh, go ahead, Missy. You want to take this one?
Yep. So this is our welcome and inclusion activity, and I'm going to later tell you about the reasons why we always try to include these in our meetings. So in the chat, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, the school district you come from, and the role that you do in your schools. And we just kind of want to see who our audience is.
Thank you to those of you that are putting in the chat box. We appreciate it.
Elk River administrators, we're seeing a lot. Special education teachers, middle school, dean of students, assistant principals. Good. Thank you. So we kind of know that we are working with schools from all across the state here.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Let's see, go good. And we're going to talk later about how many of you are actually trying to incorporate both restorative practices and PBIS into your schools, because it definitely was a puzzle for us when we tried to put the two together. And we'd love to hear from other people as well as we continue. Mary, if you want to go ahead and move on, and Aaron.
Sure. So PBIS, of course, we know that, positive behavioral interventions and supports, this is taken right from PBIS.org. It is evidence-based. It is that tiered framework, supports students' behavioral, academic, social, emotional, and mental health. So that's what PBIS encompasses. So I think we're ready to move on. So a copy of our Panthers Roars. Of course, it's respectful, optimistic, achievers, responsible, and safe. One thing that we did, and I do see we have that on there, we have it in the virtual spaces as well, because of course, when we were doing at the time when we called it the distance learning, we had to make sure that we had our matrix so that it supported our students that were online as well. So, and we've got, you'll see a picture later on, we do have our Panthers Roars displayed all over our school. It would be hard not to know that what our expectations are for our building. We've got this video by Laura Mooneman, and I came across her when I was doing some work for this presentation. She did live in the United States. I don't know if any of you have heard of her before, and now she's a consultant. I believe she lives overseas. So should I be able to be the one that just clicks on this, or how is this going to work here? I guess I'll try it. Or
I will do it. I will just need to, when it starts, give me a thumbs up if you're hearing the sound. Otherwise,
okay. Restorative practices is one of the most widely used school climate initiatives in the world because it not only improves school culture and equity, but because it offers a more effective way of addressing discipline problems. So what is restorative practices exactly? So what is restorative practices in schools? Restorative practices are a set of skills for building community and for responding to challenging behavior. Research shows that restorative practices not only reduces out-of-school suspensions, it increases school climate, strengthens relationship, and significantly improves equity in the discipline of schools, becoming an effective tool for inclusion. Restorative practices are really structured conversations. They fall on a continuum ranging from low intensity, less planning, classroom-based strategies, all the way to higher intensity, more structured, office-managed strategies. It's helpful to integrate restorative strategies into a multi-tiered system of support so that these practices become part of the universal, targeted, and intensive interventions at a school. In Tier 1, you have the proactive components of restorative practices, classroom circles and affective language. Classroom circles, also called community circles, strengthen relationships within the classroom, and then they address common classroom issues. We take turns, listen deeply, and we don't interrupt, cultivating trust and promoting equity. Once circles are a part of the classroom culture, they can be used to address difficult topics like bullying, race, or traumatic community events. In Tier 1, we also use affective statements to model how to express feelings and restorative questions to talk to students about their behavior. When you proactively establish a system of using circles in classrooms and consistently use affective language in everyday conversations, you have a solid foundation when responding to more serious incidents in Tiers 2 and 3. In Tier 2, we have more structured conversations like restorative chats, restorative mediation, and restorative circles, which usually take place outside of the classroom by another staff member. Instead of delivering punishments, judging, and scolding, we support the student to accept responsibility, to be accountable, and to make things right. A restorative chat is a short, informal conversation with a student regarding their behavior. The staff member uses the restorative questions to help the student reflect on their behavior, reintegrate them back into the classroom, and repair that relationship with the teacher. Restorative mediation helps resolve conflict and arguments between two students. Students have the opportunity to express how they've been affected by what happened, think about their actions and how it might have impacted others, and then make agreements together on how to move forward without the continued conflict. Restorative circles, also called harm circles, are in response to more serious incidents at school, and they bring together the people impacted by the incident. This requires pre-meetings so that participants understand what questions will be asked and then they agree to follow the guidelines. In a circle, the facilitator guides the participants to talk about what happened, who was affected, and how we can repair the harm. And in Tier 3, we have restorative conferences to respond to significantly disruptive or harmful incidents at school. And they're even more structured than circles, specific seating arrangements needed, and a script for the facilitator to follow. Conferences include those who did the harm and those who were harmed, as well as other people that were impacted. So while schools who implement restorative practices tend to have very few out-of-school suspensions, when it does happen, we use re-entry circles when the student returns so that we can make a plan of support for them and their families. Restorative practices give schools explicit, proactive structures to develop relationships, strengthen inclusion, and to build a culture of empathy and compassion. Then, when incidents of harm occur, restorative practices provides meaningful responses so that we can address the behavior, resolve the conflict, repair relationships, and heal. For more on how to implement restorative practices at your school, go to lauramoyman.com and download free resources, watch free training videos, and check out my online courses. If you're new here, make sure to give me a thumbs up and share with a friend. And don't forget to click subscribe to join our amazing community of educators who are growing restorative practices.
All right. Go ahead and stop that video. It got a little glitchy in the end. So our slide is going to focus on engaging strategies. And so this is an important part of, how we ensure that we are participants active. So either if you want to unmute or in the chat, you can write something. You notice what did you learn? So I can start that out. Is one thing that I noticed was the tiered system she talked about and how that really aligns well with PBIS. And I've, besides this video, really haven't seen it that much in restorative practice looking at a tiered system. So I'm just wondering if anyone else can either unmute or write in the chat. What did you notice and what did you learn about the video?
And we will talk about the reentries.
So
what that looks like here in Cass Lake. Yeah. The thing I liked about this video, this is Mary, is that it gave just a quick comprehensive look at restorative circles and the multi-tiered system. And that's what I enjoyed about it.
And then see out the scripts, and we're going to give you a good resource later in our slideshow of a book of scripts that is really useful to use as well. All right, Mary, pass it back to you.
Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide. So I like this piece about, and I just copied this out of the dictionary, but connectedness. And I put that in there because really I think that is a big piece of our success in our middle school, combining not only PBIS and restorative practices and some of the other pieces we're going to talk about, the social emotional learning, but that fact of that feeling of socially, emotionally, spiritually, professionally linked with others, with another, or the robustness of such relationships. And I have to tell you guys, as I'm sitting here, we are doing summer school, and I'm working with summer school. I had, and I don't know, maybe some of you saw me, I waved at a couple of students. They were peering, looking through the window to see what I was doing. You know what? We're pretty darn connected. We're a small building, but we're doing summer school, and it's kind of like, what is Mrs. Aery doing? So they looked in the window. I just waved at them. I felt pretty darn good that they felt connected enough that they wanted to look through the window to see what I was doing. So we are a very cohesive school family here. And Missy, I don't know if there's something you want to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, as our school climate team worked this year, we focused on creating 3 priorities, and relationships was one of those 3, is seeing our relationships. We do that a lot through restorative practices, but we also talk about what are other ways, and that's just sitting and having lunch with our students, greeting them in the halls, and kind of using common language and just being present. So we do have a homeroom time that is about 25 minutes every day. 2 of the days we focus on lessons. One of the days we do say we will sit in circle, and then the other days we're just focused on having fun. Because you know what, it's okay to have fun in school. And that's something I think that with distance learning and COVID and social distancing, we kind of lost sight of. And so we need to put fun back into our school too, and just make that action and that focus on relationships. One thing we also noticed is we need to put a focus back on adult to adult relationships amongst our staff. We focus on kids and relationships. So we noticed in this past year, we have to put focus back on staff and promoting the relationships amongst our staff. All right, Mary, you can.
Mary, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you, Erin. I mentioned earlier that we have a lot of artifacts and different things that show that we really promote PBIS in our building. And so I love this picture. I actually took it myself, but you can notice in the kind of the middle, looking down the hallway, the signage, you know, be achievers, be responsible. We have got those all over in our middle school. Our students see those every single day. I am definitely a believer in visuals, even in middle school, maybe as much in middle school. Every day we talk the talk, we walk the talk. We've got it all over. So this is part of how I think that PBIS and restorative practices do work together in our district. So ready for the next slide. So PBIS systems and structures, and you integrate them with restorative practices to respond to harm in that are more meaningful. We don't take them as separate. We integrate both systems together. We had something in the chat there. I don't know, Missy, if you had a chance to take a look at that. We can go to the next one, but Missy, if you could look at that last. Restorative practices, they're the processes that proactively build healthy relationships and a sense of community to prevent and address conflict and wrongdoing. And this is from the Restorative Practices Working Group. We do use this circle forward book in many of our circles, community circles, circles to repair harm. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move on. I don't know, Missy, if there's something before we move on from that you want to say about the circle forward book. It's a pretty thick book. Many of you have maybe used it, but if you haven't, it's a great resource.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. You're just starting to dabble into restorative practices and facilitating circles. This is your go-to book. This is the one that we said has scripts for basic scripts for community building, and then it goes into community issues as far as like, what if there's a tragedy in the community? There's a script laid out. There's a script laid out for bullying. There's a script laid out for like maybe class had a day with a sub. So that is all in there, all different examples of scripts, plus a great introduction of restorative practices and like the core competencies and stuff that go with that. So if you don't have that book, that is your go-to. And I will turn off my video to see if that helps with the glitchiness. All right. So on our next slide, we are talking about our district-wide approach.
Miss, there we go. It's like whatever you try to do, made it worse for you.
Sorry, Missy, I just muted you because we're getting a lot of feedback on your audio now too with your video off. We can try to. Yeah, with your video off, it's just constant feedback.
Okay.
Sorry, I just muted you again because we're getting a lot of that really bad glitchy feedback. You can try keeping your video on. Yeah. And see, we're getting a little bit of glitch every once in a while from you.
If you want to go to the next slide, I can continue here. So I took this right out of our handbook. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I just want to let you know that we do have this right in our K-12 handbook, because we do support restorative circles and restorative practices. And actually, we are to the point now that our students, after using this for a few years, if there is conflict between students, students will ask to have a restorative circle. They understand circles from being in classrooms. They understand them. Oftentimes, Missy and I will sit together, and then we'll have a couple of students with us, and we use the scripted process to go through it. And students do understand it, and we explain it to them, and they will ask for it. So anyway, I'll give you just a couple minutes, I should say, to read that. And it does say circles and conferences may also be used to prevent concerns from becoming a larger issue. And this is something that we really do take pride in, that, and I will explain that as I go through talking about how we use a restorative circle, that we will try and head it off at the lowest level so that we don't have to end up with a suspension. So, and it does say that we want to take a community approach and include family members whenever possible. So we can move to the next slide. So we're going to talk about what this looks like at Lake-Bena Middle School. So we've got our Panthers logo there, if you want to move to the next slide. So the things that we are going to talk about, Missy and I, today, we're going to talk about the implementation of restorative practices at Lake-Bena Middle School, that we use in our district. We're going to talk about our Arbor program. We're going to talk about community building circles, restorative circles, and re-entry meetings. This is primarily how we embed PBIS and restorative circles together. So we can move on to the next one.
So our Arbor program, this is our alternative to suspension program, which we created about 3 years ago. We, when we have an infraction where a student could be up for an out of school suspension, we propose to the family our Arbor program. We offer it up as an intervention, and that's how we log it into our MARS system. So it does not go on their discipline record as a out of school suspension. It's an intervention. The mornings are spent working on homework and the work that a student would miss if they, the work that the teachers give them, that they would get if they were in class. And then the afternoons is that restorative piece. That is where we talk about the behavior. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What could you do differently? So we also do skills that would be like maybe breathing and mindfulness, social emotional skills, different things like that. This year we gave parents the opportunity to make the choice of Arbor, our alternative to suspension program, or out of school suspension. We are hoping that next year we just kind of take away the choice and say, this is what we're doing. So just in the middle school this year, we had 60 students attend Arbor, which would be 60 less suspensions on our discipline record. So that's pretty substantial when you think about it. Our Arbor program is off-site. So the kids come in the mornings, they ride their bus as normal. We feed them breakfast, and then we have a separate bus that takes them over to the ALC, where we have a licensed teacher that provides them the education there, and a para. Granted, we were short-staffed this year and didn't have a para for most of it. And then at the end of the day, they get back on their normal busing. One thing to note with Arbor is that it has to be successful days. So if they are assigned to 3 successful days, for some kids, it might take 5. They have to complete the work, they have to participate in the skills, and they have to show us their ROARs, their PBIS components. So a lot of the skills too is reteaching the expectations. So really this is like a tier 3 intervention when we're looking at PBIS. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about community building circles. So this is going into restorative practices and kind of that framework of, building relationships and that tier 1 approach to restorative practices. So if we have to repair harm, there is nothing to repair if that relationship doesn't even exist. So that's why it's important to have the focus on relationships and build that community first. And so, like I said, one way that we do that is through community building circles. The picture there is kind of like our rotation that we did during distance learning. We always sit in circle. We come to the circle empty-handed, have our expectations, have our values laid out, review those every time that we come to circle. One thing to know is that students do have the right to pass, so they do not have to share if they don't want to. It takes a while for kids to get comfortable. They'll want to pass and constantly pass. So what we do is we make sure that students sometimes at least just say their name. So if they are sitting in circle and they pass, sometimes we say, just say your name and then pass. So there is kind of an order and a sequence about how we strengthen and build on our community building circles. So we start by just getting to know one another. We build that relationship, we build that connection. Then we start by adding stories. Okay. Then we get into addressing issues. So maybe as a teacher, I say, hey, yesterday was a really tough day. Let's get in circle and talk about it. What could we have done better with our, partner reading yesterday? And what does it look like? What does it sound like? And then as Mary's going to talk more, we get into that repairing harm and making plans. So there is a progression. You can't just repair harm without having that relationship and doing the tier 1 and tier 2 things first. Also use circle in academic lessons. So if a teacher does a lesson, sometimes they do just a stand up circle at the back of the classroom. That could just be, tell me one thing you learned today. Circles don't have to be as formal as many people think. They can be standing, sitting, just kind of a popcorn, just around the circle real quick. But when we get into those intensive tier 3 circles with repairing harm and making plans, that's when we want to do the pre-conferencing and really set up the circles strategically. How we use PBIS and restorative practices together in circle is, so like we have the roars. Our first week we teach respect, and we do a circle about what does respect look like in the hallway? What does it sound like in the hallway? And that's kind of our circle conversations for that week. So that's how we combine those two. Mary, I think you are up with restorative circles, and I'm going to try to log in from my Chromebook again because I can't hear you guys from my phone.
Thank you. I think we're ready for the next slide. So I'm going to talk about restorative circles, so you can move it now to the next slide. So I just put together a little scenario and just kind of going to talk it through with you, just to let you know what the process is like. And so, and this was based on certainly one of the real life scenarios, one of the many, many circles that, we have in the middle school. I will say a lot of times the circles are with actually, our building is 5th through 8th grade. So a lot of times it's 5th and 6th grade students, but this one happened to be, Abby happened to be a 7th grade. She'd had a falling out with her longtime friend, Anna. And then of course she joins in and making fun of Anna, Abby does, and calling her names at lunch. And then the supervisor overhears this and writes a discipline referral. Well, this is where it kind of is an important piece, because we could have just put this through as something disciplinary, but we want to stop that process and we want to make it more restorative. And as you see, it's Abby's first offense. And so the principal does have that administrative conference and tells her, if this happens again, there will be consequences. Guess what? The very next week, there are problems again. Abby pulls Anna's hair, and it continues. And so since this is Abby's second offense, the principal talks with Abby, and the principal also talks with her family. You can move it on to the next slide here, please. And so that is when we start the conversation about the PBIS restorative approach, because what we really don't want to have happen is we really just don't want to have to assign some consequence, such as a detention or something that maybe it wasn't part of the PBIS or the restorative practices approach. We want to help change the behavior. So again, on this bullet point, one of the tenets then of PBIS, one of ours is safety in all areas of the building. And so Abby, although she's in 7th grade, she's been taught this since she's been in 5th grade. Respect is another one of the tenets of PBIS in our middle school. So we're going to go back to that conversation of our PBIS. What are our values here in our building? We're going to have that conversation. And then, like I say, instead of assigning that detention, we're going to have her work with the social worker at the middle school. That conversation is going to be whether Abby is open to a restorative conversation with Anna to try and repair the harm, or how are we going to move this forward? So we can move it to the next slide. So then what happens? The social worker talks with Anna, and I can also say that sometimes it's the behavior interventionist. It's not always the social worker. Asking her if she's willing to talk about the incident. And so both parties have to agree to this. Both Anna and Abby would have to agree to this circle. The social worker, I could have put behavior interventionist, because oftentimes, you know, they work together on this. They arrange that safe, quiet environment for the circle. The norms and the values are laid out. Social worker, the behavior interventionist, asks these scripted questions. What have you been thinking about? Who's been affected? Where do we go from here? Both students are given their opportunity to tell their side of the story. And really the surprise at the end of this circle is that Abby didn't just apologize for her part in the name calling toward Anna, but Anna, the other student, admits that she secretly hoped that Abby would have to serve some detention for their behavior. So although they had been friends, it's kind of interesting, the things that will come out when we do circles. We hear things that we didn't think that we would hear. We hear things that although they're in the middle school, they might go back to when they were in the elementary school. So it's interesting. But at the end of this circle, and this is based on something that actually happened, both girls did decide to try and repair their friendship, but they decided they needed more time and support to make that happen. So then the social worker does agree that she's going to work through issues with the girls. But again, I have to say that we work in conjunction with the families, the students. We let the teachers that are involved know, because of course we're taking them out of their classes. But really this whole thing is set up to support both our PBIS program and our restorative practices, because what the outcome we want is, number one, we want them to learn that lifelong skill of how do they move ahead when we aren't there to support them in terms of doing some problem solving and figuring this out, rather than just putting them in a detention where they serve their detention. They come out of it and they might be back to the same thing. So we can move it to the next slide. So what are some of the benefits of the outcome of this scenario? Well, students are given that opportunity to learn from the incident by going through this circle process instead of, you know, Abby being sent to detention. And as I said earlier, and Missy may have mentioned that as well, students ask us when they have issues, can we do a circle? They have become familiar, especially, you know, if they've started here in the 5th grade and they're moving on up to maybe like the 7th grade. They're very familiar because of the classroom circles and the repair to harm circles and the community circles. They're familiar with how a circle operates. They will ask for a circle. So students, they're reminded of the PBIS expectations about respect and safety in the middle school. So we always tie it back. We embed the two together. It's like PBIS and restorative practices. They don't stand alone, they work together. And then it's that lifelong skill of problem solving and making amends that happen between the two students. We don't look at this as just something that's happened in an isolated incident. We look at this as you know, they're moving through the system as middle schoolers and take this as lifelong skills. And the positive outcome for the students help to promote a culture of respect and community in the middle school. And I can say that after really implementing this, well, this is my 6th year, you know, especially the last 3 years, I really think that we have really come to understand the sense of what it looks like and it feels like. And granted, you know, part of this, you know, we came through the pandemic with and had to kind of pick it back up coming back to school, but we did try to, as much virtually, continue a lot of our processes virtually. So I'm going to put it on to the next slide. And Missy is going to talk about what our re-entry meetings look like that are also part of the PBIS and restorative practices process.
All right, I'm on another device. Hopefully you guys can hear me. So we require a re-entry meeting after all out-of-school suspensions and when a student comes back to Arbor. And we do that in circles. So Erin, if you can go to the next slide, this is kind of the script that we follow. In the re-entry meeting, we make sure that we have the homeroom teacher, a parent, the student, the homeschool advocate, the administrator runs the meeting, and then sometimes social worker or behavior interventionist, whoever supports the student the most. We sit in circle. We use a talking piece. We talk about, you know, the process of the circle that we always pass to the left and everything is confidential. And it's our opportunity to have a voice and make sure that we share our concerns. Now, this is, if you think about the tiered approach, this would be a tier 3 restorative practices approach. But we want to make sure that we always focus on the positive first. So we start meetings and it can often be tense, but after we talk about strengths of the student and a family member can hear 6 of us adults talking about the great things about each student, you could just kind of feel the tension leave the room. So make sure that you are including those into your re-entry meetings. We do give the students the right to pass, but we do kind of try to pick something out of them, like, you know, basketball has to be a strength of yours, or I know you're really good at math. So even if we can get them to agree with us, that's great. We address the concerns. So every person around the table lists their concerns, and sometimes, of course, they're the same concerns. But it's good that everyone has the voice. And sometimes the students will tell us a concern that we didn't even know about. And so they know that this meeting is for them, it's about them, and we are going to focus on getting them the supports that they need. After those concerns, we talk about goals. So again, that's an uplifting thing again. And then we figure out a plan of action. So our plans could be working with one of the school counselors, working with the social worker, working with behavior interventionists. It could be having that restorative circle with the person they maybe got in a fight with. Maybe having a circle with a teacher that they have an argument with. So all of that is discussed in the plan, and we focus on any harm that needs to be repaired. That's really important in the process. So all of these notes then are shared out with the people that need to be made aware of it. Check and connects are a big thing. Reteaching those expectations and tying in PBIS, of course. Maybe different seating charts, you know, whatever. We make it happen so a student is successful, and we all leave the meeting feeling very positive. If we want to go to the next slide. Here's our twist. So we, before COVID, got really, really good about PBIS and restorative practices. It took us a while to figure out how they combine, but we got it figured out in a way that worked for us. During our distance learning year, we applied for a grant. Nobody really knew about it, but we got it. That got us involved with a SEL cohort. So all of a sudden we have restorative practices, PBIS, and now SEL. And I'll tell you what, it was very alarming at first. How in the world can we add one more thing to our plate? What are we going to do? How can we make this work? It's just one more thing. So we did need to take it slow. And what we decided is our first year, we're going to focus on us as adults. So as adults, we need to work on our emotions, and we need to work on our relationships and our social awareness and responsible decision making. So the first year of our SEL implementation, was adult SEL. And we had one meeting a month with a coach from Peacemaker Resources out of Bemidji, who led us through a 90-minute training during our PLC. And so the goal is to get to transformative SEL. So what that means is that it's involved in everything we do in the school day. It's what we live, it's what we breathe, and it's systemic. So it's not just one canned curriculum we teach for 15 minutes a day. It's infused into every part of the day in all classrooms, into the community, and even out of school. So that kind of gives you the definition of transformative SEL. If you go to the next page, that'd be great. Are you guys losing me again? Mary, can you hear
We
me?
are.
Oh, shoot.
Yes, it's getting choppy again.
Okay, continue. That would be great. And I'll call my phone.
So this is the part of the SEL, the self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, and self-awareness. And again, we spent, like Missy said, that first year focusing on relationships between staff, and it has been very transformative. So as Missy said, when we talk about the different initiatives, the different, things that we have within our building, we do have quite a few, but I think what we have learned is that we can infuse them and embed them, and they can all benefit, all of us in our building, starting with the building blocks, starting with the, everything under the umbrella, and infusing, PBIS and restorative practices and SEL, they can all work together. I think that's the really positive thing about it. We can move to the next slide, and if Missy has something else that she wants to share in this when she comes back. So again, I talked, about those SEL core competencies. Those are the things that, as we went through that first year working with Peacemaker Resources, that when they met with us as staff, and this was also done virtually, that we did break circles, and we started in a bigger circle, and then we went into rooms and smaller groups, and we did work through each of these SEL core competencies. And I will tell you that it was very, well, I use the word transformative, but it wasn't always easy. Some of it was hard work, but I definitely think that it helped to build more cohesive staff, and that has also helped to promote, it definitely is promote a more positive climate here in middle school. It doesn't happen overnight, but each of these things builds on the other ones. So especially I like that one, that ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations. So we can move on to the next slide.
All right, and I am here. So part of SEL is really focusing on the 3 signature practices. So this is Castle's from his playbook, the 3 signature practices playbook. And so we make sure that every meeting we have a welcoming and inclusion activity, we have the engaging strategies, and an optimistic close. So that's part of how we are incorporating SEL in as well. And if we go to the next slide, so here's all 3 of our major initiatives: SEL, PBIS, restorative practices, but they all fall under creating a positive climate. And If we go to the next slide, it says it's a braided approach. So they're all intertwined in one another. It's not one thing and then the next and then the next. They're all woven together and braided together. One thing that I've learned is that if a student does not have the regulation skills from SEL, they're not going to be able to learn the expectations from PBIS. If they don't know the expectations from PBIS and they don't build community and don't have relationships, they're not going to be able to repair harm. So again, that just kind of shows how it's braided together. They have to have the skills from SEL. We have to have the expectations laid out through PBIS with positive reinforcements. And we need to build community through restorative practices and repair the harm through restorative practices. So that's how they are woven together.
Yeah, and this is Mary, and that goes back to that connectedness. You know, I had the students knocking on the window, wanting to connect with me, wanting to say hi to me. That doesn't just happen. That's, this braided approach, all of us working together on all of the initiatives. So I think we're ready for the next one.
All right, so one thing for our optimistic close, just to show you our 3 signature practices, is in the chat box, or you can unmute. What is one thing that you will take away from this presentation? And while you are typing, Mary can kind of talk about our beliefs on the next slide. I know we're getting short on time.
Mary, you're on mute. I'm sure you're saying great stuff. We just can't.
I am saying great stuff. Well, just as it's saying here, as we close, we do believe that the benefits, using PBIS, restorative practices, SEL, this approach really, really does promote a healthier and a safer environment for our students and staff. And like I said, this hasn't happened overnight. This has taken a few years, and we've come through the pandemic, doing a lot of our work virtually. It has been a lot of hard work, but boy, we are really starting to see the benefits. Even as Missy said, the 60 students that would have been suspended from school, but because they went through that Arbor program and we put all of our practices in place in terms of, reteaching the expectations and the social emotional learning and the restorative practices, it has a safer and a healthier environment for all of us. I don't know, Missy, if there's something you want to add to that as we're closing out here.
No, that's pretty much it. Is, we know this works for us. We've gone through probably 3 administrators in the last 4 years, but the core group of us who stay and believe in the work, we just say, get back to the basics, get back to PBIS, get back to restorative practices. This works. Let's regain our focus. So yeah, we will take any questions. I know we have another session coming up.
Yeah, we know we're just about out of time. You can put it to that last slide. We put our contact information there, isd115.net. We are so grateful that we were able to provide this information today. So grateful that you attended our presentation, and we'd love to hear from you, or if you have something that you want to share with us about how some of this is working in your district, in your building. We are always up for learning something new. We're all in it together. So I guess that would be my closing. Missy, if there's something you want to close out with.
Missy has nothing to close out with. Thank you. Missy, do you have anything you wanted to close out with?
No, I don't think so. I was reading the chat, sorry. And yeah, most people like the braided approach. And that is really, really confusing as you're going through the process. And it literally had to be explained to me like several times, like, how do we make this all work? So you're going to have to hear it over and over again and make it work for your school. There's not an exact way to do it. Find the way that works for you and for your school.
Get started.
Okay, you are in the session now for school examples of supporting students' mental health needs through a PBIS lens. This will be a great session to hear from our counterparts who are actually using PBIS now in a time post-pandemic. Student mental health is needing more support than ever before. So it's nice to hear from our colleagues, and I will turn over to Becki, Anna, and Ashley to share their story of how they're using PBIS and the positive aspects of that to support student mental health.
All right. So my name is Becki Church. I work at Leaf River, White Pine, and Elm Tree Academies. We are the federal setting level 4 through freshwater education district, and we serve 13 different districts. The kids who need additional help come to us with behavior issues. They're really seeking out more mental health help in the first place. So above and beyond what we're going through this year, they're in need of mental health services anyway. Our academies consist of Leaf River, that's 2 different classrooms. Actually, Leaf River is 3 classrooms. That's K through 8, but of course the mix of kids in each room depends on our population we have at the time, and it is just dynamic throughout the year. It can change. 8 kids per classroom maximum. White Pine consists of 2 classrooms. Those are a little bit older students, and 8 kids again per classroom. And then Elm Tree is our autism unit, and they have a maximum of 6 kids, and that's just 1 classroom. The difference between the academies are Leaf River has 2 social skills groups per day, and White Pine has 1 social skills group per day. Leaf River also has the mental health services through Stellar Mental Health. That's our provider. And then White Pine has our social worker for mental health sessions, but they can also have the Stellar Mental Health Services. Elm Tree at this time has time alone with, each student has time alone with the school social worker. That might be changing this year to add more of those Stellar Mental Health Services, depending on the student. And these are all per parent approval. Parents need to be okay with having that additional mental health time. Our district also provides related services, the OT, speech, PT, DAPE, those things. And so let's just keep moving on. If you guys can go to the next slide. So again, I said my name is Becki Church. I was the middle school teacher in the Leaf River Academy. And last year I changed roles. I am now the crisis interventionist. However, we had some new staff and a lot of staff shortages. So I really didn't get to enter into my new role and what I viewed it to be this year or this past school year. So I'm looking forward to a fresh start in the fall and implementing some of those changes I wanted to do before we're hiring some other staff. I'm also the PBIS coach, and so I gather the students for the student committee. I plan all the meetings. I plan the staff meetings. I plan school-wide events, of course, with input from everybody, but I'm kind of responsible for the whole PBIS program. And we have a really good team, and we meet monthly. There are some school-wide changes that I mentioned. We're going to have, I think it's 3 new teachers next year, some new paras, and we're doing some other things. I heard somebody talking about taking on SEL last year. Well, we're going to do something big. We are going to take a huge chunk of our day for project-based learning. We're doing some great big changes in there. So I'm a little nervous. I'm excited, but pretty nervous because we're going to be doing a lot of mixed group work, combining some different age groups. And the reason I'm a little bit nervous is our Swiss data told us last year that we need to separate some of these age groups, and it helped. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. We're also going to try to continue with some credit recovery for our high school students, because when they come to us, a lot of times they've been hospitalized or something like that, or truancy. And so we're trying to get them credits for graduation as well. And another thing we're going to start doing next year is using the structured teach method. We do that quite a bit anyway with your classroom rotations between teacher time, independent time, and then supplemental time with a paraprofessional. But we're going to make that a lot more clear, so every classroom is doing that. And then we are adding the role of a social skills assistant, which I think will be great, because otherwise we have a staff member that does the social skills groups for that Leaf River group of kids there. They have those 2 skills a day. And so an assistant with that would help. Otherwise, it's all on that teacher to do that. All right, next slide. All right, something kind of unique for us. Well, probably not unique. I think anybody that does PBIS is working toward this, but everybody is a part of our PBIS program, meaning everybody basically in Freshwater Education District, because we are K-12. We've got teachers, paras, van drivers, social worker, mental health professionals. Related services are folks that come in to help out, such as our DAPE and speech and such. And then the way we're set up, we're connected to the office building. And so even those office employees are part of PBIS. Our custodian he used to be a FIED teacher, so he knows what managing kids are about. And the substitutes that come into our building, we also have them part of it to make sure they understand that we're built on earning and positives and not so much punitive like they may have experience with in other buildings. When I say they're part of it, it means that like we have students who have jobs over in the office side, some of our autistic kids. And so the staff over there know to hand them out behavior bucks when they do a good job or when they come over, or how to greet them and wait for a greeting back, kind of that wait time. And the same with our related services. They offer up behavior bucks, our positives. And then they also know how to use our systems approach if students aren't following their directions when they're in DAPE or something like that. And so they can, write them up with referrals if they need to. Next. So these are some of the things that are kind of out of the ordinary that we currently do. We have our respect certificate, and when we have child study meetings every week, we decide for the following week who earns that respect certificate. And then in our Friday drawings, we have weekly drawings, we announce the student. And so that student then on Monday gets to make fresh baked chocolate chip cookies for our students who are on level 5. So that's current. Our Golden Spoon Award is also decided in child study. We talk about what kid has had the best manners, please and thank yous, not just in the lunch and breakfast area, but throughout the day. And then they get a trophy. There's about a 2-foot tall trophy with a golden spoon on it. And kids really buy into that. And then in the middle is just a random reward for kids. It's an incentive just to go above and beyond. Maybe it's a student who doesn't usually hold the door for others and they're holding the door. They get a little token, and then they can come down to the office and get a gumball. Some of our gumballs are actually in capsules, and within the capsule, there might be a little tiny slip of paper where they also win a pop or 100 extra store points or 15 minutes in the gym with a buddy, things like that. So those are current incentives beyond our regular PBIS rewards. Next. So what to do in these very difficult times where student mental health is so intense. That is my best word for it, is just intense. It's relationships, totally building those relationships with the students themselves, with your colleagues, with other providers, and with the parent too. When our students are having mental health issues here, it's not just in our building, because usually when they're coming to a school, this is their stable place and where they feel safe. And so it's pretty sure that they're going to be having some issues at home. So you need to have that parent contact as well. And then again, building those relationships, but talking to staff, so the students who transition from classroom to classroom can feel that relationship with each staff they're encountering. Some really huge struggles we saw this year were students coming to us that really are level 5 students that should probably be in a residential facility. However, there are no beds available. I'm sure you've experienced that. With no availability of beds in residential facilities, these kids have to go to school. If we have an opening, we cannot say no. We cannot say, you know what, their needs are too intense for level 4. We have to accept the student. And that is some of the things we saw. We had some kiddos this year that, we tried every day, and we had to get pretty creative with some things to help them as much as we possibly could. And really what it came down to were a couple kids just really needed to go on altered days. We didn't have a choice in the matter with that. And so we did have a few students who are waiting for residential placement, and their county workers know that, and the family knows that. But it's 6 to 9 months out. This was at the end of the school year, still 6 to 9 months out, and they had gotten on the list in January. So it's tough. Facial expression recognition, this is a must. Again, it goes back to the relationships and knowing your students. But when a kid comes in and you have to look and see what their face looks like, if anything looks a little bit different or not quite right, go with your gut. We talk a lot about PBIS in catching a kid doing something good. You need to do that, but you also need to catch a kid who's feeling rough. And sometimes they look sleepy when they usually don't. It might be they don't have their backpack when they usually do. It could be they're usually very tidy and well kept, and they're coming in with some dirty clothes on and messy hair. So it's just go with your gut, pull the kid aside and ask them, how are things going? Are you feeling okay? We also use LSCI, which is life-based crisis intervention, here at the level 4. And when you're pulling those kids that are looking tough, and it might not just be in the morning, it might be in the middle of the day, in the middle of class, on their way to the bathroom, you might find that they simply explode. And it's just a matter of taking the time, letting them drain off. And they might swear, they might lie, they might cry. It doesn't matter. Just let them drain off. So then you can start talking to them and finding out what is happening. Something that you need to incorporate in that is, if it is a kid and they do drain off, and then when it comes to the end of the drain off, then we're entering into PBIS again. You know what? I'm going to give you some extra points or some behavior bucks for taking the time and just visiting with me. I'm going to give you extra behavior bucks for not throwing anything. Things like that. Catch the littlest thing. And then again, watching for those factors that might have an influence on behavior. Maybe we know that mom had to go to the hospital for something or had a surgery, or maybe grandma passed away, or we had a couple students this year that had pets pass away. And the thing is, that was huge for these kids. And when they're already in a mental health crisis, just one more thing just really pushed them over the edge. And again, having that close parent contact is critical. just to make sure that we know about those outside factors that could be influential. And then a huge thing this year we really relied more and more on was the outside agency support. So those were supports from county mental health case managers, social workers outside of school, and unfortunately, but necessary, probation officers. One thing we've identified and are working toward is a better communication with those different silos of people that have contact with the students. And adding additional mental health time. Like I said, some of the students have 2 30-minute sessions with our mental health workers. If we had a kid that was in crisis, or maybe it's somebody whose pet did die, we went ahead and added another half an hour per week for that student. And we do that in crisis situations, which happened a lot this year, and as a more temporary thing. So it's not a full-blown IEP meeting, having everybody gathered together again. We can just do that in a crisis situation, not having to go through all the details and change the service grid and all that. One thing we found out that there were a lot of kids who need that check-in, check-out. We've, of course, have done this all along, but some of these top hitters, we found that they wanted somebody just to take the minute privately with them to say, how was your evening? Did you go to that game you wanted to go to? More of a, just a normal adult relationship with them that they might be missing somewhere else in their life. And then the continued communication, that's just communicating with when you find somebody that's having a tough day, letting all the other staff know. That was tough this year because we just found that we were constantly heightened, on the go, almost in a reactive mode all year. And so trying to be proactive with that was so critical. And then celebrating any little positive. We had a number of students who were self-harming this year. We had, this was very shocking to me and odd. We had some students leaving things in areas for other students to harm themselves with, such as little pieces of metal or busted paper clips. We had situations where kids were taking paper clips and putting them inside gel pens and making tattoo guns and then scratching themselves and letting the ink drip down in. I mean, it was really a tough year. And so celebrating those positives, it might be some of those kids that are self-harming and just saying, you know what, come with me, I'm giving you a gumball. And they're kind of, why, what? You kept yourself safe today. You kept your body safe. So we really had to give kudos for preventing some of those mental health crises. Next. A couple other big things we did. Every year we have a pizza fundraiser, and this is where students sell pizzas. And this year we figured out what we wanted to do with that money. Instead of just, okay, we have this money in a fund, we're going to go on some field trips. We made it a big thing right away. And it was great because students really latched onto that. They took pride. Then it's like they had a job to do. Like they were doing this for themselves and not just some pot of money that they don't know what's going to happen with. We had a huge event at the end of the year. We bought or rented this huge inflatable boot camp. And so the kids could see, you know, we're doing this to earn. And it felt like a whole family almost of kids working. And then at the event, then it was announced that thanking everybody for their participation in that. So that seemed to help with their mental health too. They had a purpose. Next. Some of our goals for the future, and every year we want to do this, have more parent communication regarding our PBIS and the things we do with PBIS. And it's difficult sometimes because of HIPAA laws. And so like with our Swiss data, we can't do a whole lot with sharing too much of that. But as far as our point sheets and what they look like and what parents want to see on them, or if parents want some type of a training on the point sheet or a guide as to how to read some of that stuff, that's what we want to start including. And I already have a couple parents lined up that are willing to help with that. So we just really have to push a little harder and get some of these things going. In the middle there, the more top 5 kudos. Our top 5 students are the ones who are struggling the most. And we talk about them in child study. We identify them. Staff knows about them. But we really need to hone in on that a little bit more, because our top 5, we had thousands of referrals this year. It's unreal, thousands. And so those top 5, we need to make more individual time with those kids. Instead of just, again, catching them doing something good and giving them more kudos that way, the PBIS, it's actually pulling them aside and working more individually with them and trying to help out, and maybe giving their county health case manager, a mental health case manager, a call and saying, can you please come visit them this week? They're really having a tough time, and just including more adults in their life so they feel like there's somebody listening. More time in the community, the top right bubble. That's something we just felt like we were always in a crunch. And I'll tell you, COVID just has done so much to change the way things are and the way people feel about things, that we need to get more time in the community, taking kids to businesses, checking them out, looking at career type things for kids or jobs they could have after high school, or simply taking students to maybe the water treatment plant, getting back to things like that, because they've been so isolated for so long. They have lost some of those skills on how to act out in the community, how to socialize with adults that they don't know. So we need to really get in and start teaching some more of that. And that's those social skills. Get more student committee ideas. Right now, our student committee, we have students on there for a whole quarter and then they switch out. But I want to change that up to have it monthly, so we get a lot more kids in the mix, and try to get some kids that are pretty shy and anxious about being on a committee, try to get them rolling with some more of this. And really, it's about empowering the students and giving them the flexibility to say, you know what, instead of that inflatable thing, let's work for this. Or instead of tie-dyeing shirts for one of our activities, let's do this, things like that. And then more physical activity, that we just have to do a lot more of that. Again, that's part of not getting out and about. So we want to actually look at possibly having a Phi-Ed type class at least once a week or twice a week. We do have recess and some rec time, but we don't have specific Phi-Ed classes here. But we need to get kids moving. And we notice that mental health is a lot better when kids are physically active. Too much sitting is causing some issues. All right. I might be a little cutting it short on time here, but anybody have any questions? You can go to the next slide. Any questions for me? Oops, I see some stuff in the chat here. I don't know if that's for me. No? Okay. The next slide is my information. If anybody wants to email or has any questions they think of later, or wants any ideas for things, some of the things we're doing, feel free to contact me. All right, thanks for your time.
All right, we're up. First, we want to give you a little forewarning. We do have 5 children in the house right now. So if anyone pops in, it's part of the show. So we're gonna get started. We are from Morristown, Minnesota, and we are teaching grades 5 through 8 down there.
All right, I'm Anna Skidmore. And I've been in the district for a number of years. Last year I completed my first year teaching junior high math, so that was a new experience for me. I am the coach of our PBIS team, so I do a lot with the data in terms of gathering data, making sure that we take our SAS at the right time, making sure that we do our tiered inventory together. All of those things are kind of the things that I try to work on. And then Ashley and I do a lot together with grant writing and some of those award type things as well.
And I'm Ashley Landru. I teach 5th grade in our building. It's my first year in 5th grade, but I've been in our building and on the PBIS team for 10 years. So our school district is comprised of about 3 small towns. There's some other little tiny towns that also feed into it. We have Waterville, Elysian, and Morristown. And again, we have grades 5 through 8. We started our PBIS journey in 2012, and since then we've had 6 exemplar awards. Our main struggles right now are training new staff at the beginning of the year, and the harder part is the ones that join throughout the year. That gets a little complicated. And then student mental health and some teacher mental health too.
So in our building, we have 2 kind of very separate models, and we're looking and working with our administration to move more to a middle school type setting, which will be beneficial to everybody in our building. But right now we run on a 5th and 6th grade model that's more classroom based with a couple, we call them switches, where they travel to different teachers, but they travel as a class. And then a 7th and 8th grade model, which is a true junior high model. So they have 7 different classes during the day. And with the mental health piece in our school, we actually have, for being a small rural school, we have a couple really great things happening. We do have a counselor in our building. We have 3 counselors in our district. And our counselor in our building is there 4 days a week, so that's awesome. We also have counseling services of Southern Minnesota who come in several times throughout the week to see different students in our building, and that obviously is based on referral and then their process for identifying students who can be a part of that service.
Our district has been really quite supportive of helping us to learn more about mental health and about PBIS and kind of how they can work together. So at the beginning of the year and throughout the year, we have different opportunities to learn about mental health and key warning signs of mental illness and those sorts of things. The counseling services of Southern Minnesota has been able to come in and do some of those presentations for us, which has been nice because they really know what they're talking about being counselors and all. So that has really been very impactful on our teaching staff. And then we do PBIS trainings at the beginning of the year. We're trying to think of ways to kind of refresh the training for the teachers throughout the year too. We're really good at reteaching the students about PBIS and what it means to show Bucks pride, but are we actually refreshing the teachers' minds too? That's something we want to look at. Another support we have to support mental health is positivity. Our staff as a whole is very positive and uplifting. We really, we consider ourselves family members, so we treat everyone with love and respect, and that kind of trickles down to our students. All of our expectations are in positive language, and we're never demeaning students in front of the class. We talk quietly after class, or if we have to redirect, we do it quietly and in a private manner to maintain that positivity, because helping a student maintain their self-image is important, especially right now. Our counselor comes into our 5th and 6th grade classrooms every other week to talk about not necessarily mental health, but making friendships, staying organized, safety online, those sorts of things. And those all play into the mental health piece, because if you are protecting yourself in those areas and you know how to handle these stressful friendship situations, you are more likely to have a positive mental state about you. So we thought that that has been a really good thing for our students. We also have a new position within the past 3 years called a student success coordinator. And that is a teacher on special assignment who is in charge of coordinating the success of students. So she's not necessarily trained in mental health, but she is trained in other types of behavior interventions that can help and support students. And she also works hard to build connections with these students so they feel supported at school. And that kind of flows into our relationship building. Our administration has been very strong at supporting us in building relationships, at least the first 6 to 8 weeks of school, and focusing less on content and more on making connections with our students. So we have been very lucky, I think, to have administrators that understand that relationships come before everything else. And that has had a positive impact on our students' mental health.
All right. The next thing is we were trained, our district employees were trained by Dr. Kevin Felter, which I know some of you have heard from him earlier today, on our check-in, check-out system. And so we've really kind of made that our own, using the basis of what we learned about. Our check-in, check-out, this year we did not nearly have enough students on it as we had wanted. So that's something that as a team over the summer, we're looking at how do we increase that amount, because you're supposed to have 5 to 10% of your students on a check-in, check-out. But we think that this is something that really ties into the mental health of our students, because Ashley's gonna step out for just a second. We feel like by implementing the check-in, check-out for certain students, it allows them the time to check in individually with their teachers at the end of every single class. You can see kind of up at the top of our slips here, we have different things that they need to do. So sometimes it's homework completion, sometimes it's materials being ready or self-advocating. Sometimes it is just our pillars: respectful, responsible, positive, safe, and kind. So those are the things that we kind of are looking for, and we tweak the check-in, check-out for individual students, but it allows them that time every probably 40 to 50 minutes to check in with an adult about how they're doing, what did they accomplish the night before, where are they going, and then they have their one key person that they check in with at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. We've seen great success with that. We have one teacher who ran our title program who did a lot of our check-in, check-out, and she made such great connections with those students that they left the year being more prepared for the following year. And that's a fluid system too. So they're not necessarily on this every single quarter, but sometimes they're on for a quarter or two, and then we let them try it on their own, and then they need to come back, or they have it and they have the skills they need to succeed. And so then they don't need this part anymore.
All right, we also support our staff and their mental health by creating positivity for them as well. So our main concept here is that we have our Best of the Super Staff Award, or our BOSS Award, and that is pictured on the right. It's that big ugly trophy, and on the big trophy there's this little card that you can see in the middle of the screen. When you win a BOSS Award from being nominated by other staff, you get to choose a free classroom supply, a high caloric snack or a low caloric snack, or one of our administrators will step in for you at the end of the day and you can leave school early. So it's been nice to have a way to recognize other teachers for going above and beyond and helping us in different ways. We also celebrate different days like School Lunch Hero Day, or Administrative Assistant Day, or like Principal Day and Teacher Appreciation, and all those different things to help our students recognize that you should be celebrating the people that are helping you also. And that has been really good for, even just for a moment, for people on our staff to feel appreciated. They really enjoy that.
All right, and then we definitely try to create a positive school environment as well, where kids feel welcome and feel a part of our school. You can see we have a mural painted by one of our, or a Wordle kind of thing, on the big wall as everybody comes into the school with our Bucks Pride, with some of those encouraging statements. And then the 4 windows that you see down at the bottom are actually in our cafeteria. So throughout the year, we have people who decorate those. Our theme this year was kindness and showing kindness, and really teaching how to be kind. And so we had that this year. And then with some of our grant money one year, we had some signs made. So on the left-hand side, you can see your attitude determines your direction. That was one from one of our local sign shops. We bought some of those, and those are hung up around that school as well. So just those positive school environment, places where it's a welcoming environment to be in, which I think ties into that mental health too, because it makes you want to be at school rather than, oh, this is a place I have to go, and that just drags you down. So.
All right. We also like to recognize our students. We have our monthly Bucks Pride drawings in grades 5 and 6. And then in 7th and 8th grade, they use their tokens as money in our school store. So on the right-hand side, you can see a pile of tokens. That was for one monthly drawing for 5th and 6th grade. They're pretty. We like them. So students earn the tokens and then they win prizes. We also have our Bucks Pride Focus Students of the Month. These are not necessarily your smartest, highest GPA students. These are your students that have been working hard to show Bucks Pride to other people. Are they being respectful, responsible, positive, safe, and kind in the hallways? Yes. Are they passing all their classes? Maybe not, but they're treating others with respect. And so sometimes if you can find something to celebrate and recognize by having them be the Bucks Pride Focus student, that has positive impacts in other areas of their academic and social life. Down at the bottom left, we have a Rockstar token because after our first couple of years of doing PBIS in our school, we had some students complaining that they never got tokens because they were always being good. And there are students who are always good. So you don't necessarily like say, oh, wow, you were great again, here's a token. So we created a Rockstar token. And a Rockstar token is for those students that are like, you can always count on them. They're your trustworthy students to just, they're going to do what they're supposed to do. So they can be recognized with Rockstar tokens. And Rockstar tokens are worth bonus tokens. Each Rockstar token is actually 3 regular tokens. So then when they earn the Rockstar token, they feel extra special. And then we also send home postcards. We try to do 1 per student at least each year. We try to get them all sent home before Christmas. The ones pictured on the left were designed by students a couple years ago. Sometimes we have a contest and have the students design the postcards, and then teachers write positive things on the back and send them home.
All right, we talked quickly. So if you have anything that you would like to question us on, please feel free to ask questions. Otherwise, our contact information is there, and we are happy to share anything or everything that we have done or found successful with you, as we have pulled our resources from other places as well, and kind of made it our own. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you, Ashley and Anna and Becki, for sharing all the awesome information. If no one has questions, I've linked the evaluation for day 1 in the chat. You can click on that and provide feedback. We really do take that feedback seriously and use it to plan for future summer institutes. We do have time for questions. I don't know if I gave enough time there, but if anyone has any questions, please ask them. It looks like Jamie had one in the chat. If you could give any input or resources on how to set up a school store. Thank you for the question, Jamie.
Absolutely. So our school store is for our 7th and 8th graders, and we actually utilize our junior high student council to man the store. So our counselor is usually in charge of it, although we're going to change that up for this next year because it became overwhelming for just one person to do. So we check in with our student council members. They do some surveying of their class members about what they want to see in the store. We try to do things that aren't that don't cost a whole lot. Because obviously, you know, we're a school and we don't make any money. So we run it usually twice a month, and 2 student council members run the store. So they are in there during their lunchtime. We can open it up after everybody has gone through the lunch line, which is good. They bring their tokens with them. And then they can purchase things from the store. A couple of the major ones that the 7th and 8th graders really like are extra passes. So next year we are implementing a more direct pass system for how many times they can leave class, because we were finding issues with people kind of roaming the hall. Just a few individuals, but this will help with that. So being able to purchase extra passes will be helpful. They love the drop your lowest score coupons. And we do that for math, English, social studies for sure has those coupons. And that's helpful because they think they're getting away with something. They still have to do the assignment, but then they can go back in the quarter and say, oh, this one I didn't do well on, please drop that. And it helps their grade a little bit. And that's free and easy to do. We do like pizza parties and ice cream sundae parties and things like that as well, where they can, it's a lot of tokens, so they really have to work together. You know, 4 or 5 people come together, put all their tokens together and purchase that. We have some trinkety things, pencils, highlighters, pens, whiteboard markers are a hot commodity. You never have enough whiteboard markers when you teach math. So kids will buy those so that they have one for my class. Front of the lunch line is also huge. So they get to leave for lunch early and they can pick a friend, and they usually get it for a couple days or even a whole week. So they get to go in front of all the 7th and 8th graders. This past year we did opposite weeks or 2 weeks at a time, where like 8th grade would go first for 2 weeks and then 7th grade. So if a 7th grader bought that, they would get to go ahead of the 8th graders, and that was a big deal for them as well. So some other things that we found in the past is like we have a courtyard by our cafeteria, so they could purchase courtyard lunchtime as well. So just some of those free things. Teacher take your notes for you is another great one. Most of the time, all of us have to provide notes for our special education students anyway, so it's not like we don't have them done, but regular ed students find that fantastic. If it's a day of lots of notes, they can say, oh, you're going to do it for me. They still have to pay attention, but the notes are given. And then our FIED department has makeup slips if you're gone a day to earn your points back. And so they would do free makeup slips as well, that you could purchase those. So again, it's those little things that the kids think they're getting away with a lot, when in the grand scheme of things, it's not, but it's free for us, and that makes it easy. There is a menu, kind of. So like all of the like drop your lowest score and all of that, there's a set number of those, and they hang on a board. So once you purchase it and are given it, then there might not be any left for the next people in line. And then those bigger items like, I forgot to talk about our sherry cookies. So our lunch lady is awesome, and she makes really good treats. And so there's always 2 or 4 of those every time the store is open as well, and they can purchase a treat and they go get that. But there's a board that says, you know, sherry treats, this many tokens, or pizza party, this many tokens, and then all of the trinkety stuff that they can buy. And sometimes we have earbuds or water bottles, or we do a lot of with donations, with parent donations. This year we created an Amazon wish list for our Bucks Pride team, so that they can just buy it right from there and send it to us directly, which was great. We've already had a few of those come in for next year, so that's good. But yeah, so it's kind of up there, and it varies every time the store is open. So they may not know what's going to be in there, and they just bring their tokens with, and they don't, for the junior high, they don't have to spend them in the month that they get the token. So they can kind of hoard them all year. And then by the end of the year, we kind of do a blowout time, and then they purchase that, or they can put their tokens in for like an end of the year reward. So that kind of gives them another option if they didn't find anything they wanted in the store.
Excellent. Any other questions from participants? Thank you, Jamie, for the question. Ashley and Becki, thank you for sharing all that information. It's so good to learn from colleagues who are doing this every day and have a great program such as yours set up. So thank you for sharing all of your information.